Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie. Today's the first week in April, and Gigi and I are nice and warm in the house while a storm is raging outside. But I wanted to show you a video that I made of Dan Owen, who's an arborist, a class that he did in mid-February. Now, it's taken a while to edit it down. I was paying more attention to what Dan was doing and talking about pruning than filming, but I did capture a lot of what he said, and I edited it down to the best points he made about pruning apple trees and pear trees. So this video has a lot of good information in it. I wanted to show you what he said, and hopefully this is helpful to you. So let's start in with Dan's class.
So what you want to do on apples, take note, there is different pruning amounts you do on all of the trees, okay? On the peaches, well, as we just noted, you prune them more, okay? You do that because peaches and nectarines are unique in most of the fruit tree realm because they only produce flowers on the year they're growing. On this apple,
that's a pear.
That's a pear tree.
So you have two apples and a pear in that.
On a pear tree,
grouping.
There's last year's bud, but you've got these two flowers right there, okay? You got a flower at the end of that thing, but we're going to get cutting some of this stuff off. And the pears and apples and apricots and plums, etc., will produce flowers multiple years on spurs. Peaches and nectarines don't do that. Therefore, for the majority of a peach and nectarine's life, you cut off 3/4 of it. 3/4 of the thing. So you because you want to make it water sprout. As we discussed a couple years ago, you're actually topping the tree to make it grow like nuts. Okay, and that's what you're trying to do. Spurs. That is a spur. Okay, some fruit trees, most fruit trees, will make them and produce flowers on them year after year after year after year after year. And some people will take a look at plums and apricots. They will see the spurs on the tree and say, "Oh, there's a spur there. I ought to leave that on there for more fruit." Those spurs on apricots and plums don't last forever. And when you see those things and they're dry as a bone, all they are now is a thorn. Some trees are more sensitive than others, like pears. And if you take 15% of a pear off, it's going to react poorly. 15%, that's all you get on a pear. And if you do take more than that, that's when you get these things right here. That's a water sprout. You can look on there and you can see that those tiny little buds are there. Those are pretty much all leaves. And when you get a water sprout, the thing is growing so fast, it forgets to put flowers on them. Therefore, when you have these things like that, you take them off because one, they're unproductive. See that? The whole thing is a water sprout, but we're trying to maintain the tree and make sure it can keep growing. Because you don't always take it. I'm sorry, what?
That's good. Yeah, that's why you left the bottom branch.
Yes, you leave some bottom branches, and you never cut things off like that. That makes you look like you're a bad pruner. And you look over here, and both these things here look pretty good, but that on top there, that looks like it could be a flower, so we're going to leave that one. You take these things here, and you cut them at an angle. And then you take this one right here, and I don't like either of those on there.
So there's lots of things you're looking for when you're pruning these kind of trees.
Exactly.
You're looking for shape, and you're looking to produce fruiting wood and to open it up.
Open it up, get some light down in there.
I have a question about the spurs again. Do you thin the fruit to one per spur?
That depends upon what type of tree it is. You would never do that to a cherry. Because this one over here is getting too far out. And also, if you put 20 pounds of pears on there, it's going to break over here. You know, that happens much more often with peaches and nectarines because the wood is weak there on those things. And the wood on...
So how do you know where
because that's called a heading cut right there. You don't need to know the term. You're going to cut it at approximately a 45-degree angle, leaving so that this thing here can grow that way. If I was cut at the 45-degree angle the other way,
And I've noticed what Dan is doing is kind of what I do, although it differs. So he's pruning those to an upward facing branch because that's going to limit the spread out. If you want your, so do you see how my branches up there kind of have like this, I call it a muscular look where it flows out that way? You prune to a lower facing branch to get that look. It's how you want your tree to grow. So the lower ones, when I take those lower ones off, I'm sorry, when I leave the lower ones on, they're going to continue to go out. If I prune to one that's facing up, it's going to limit the spread out.
There's a couple of things I'm looking to do here. One, I'm trying to reduce the amount of stuff we've got on here because one of the limitations of the tiny tree thing is all the trees are always leaning out. Yes. Always leaning out this way, that way, that way, you know, and eventually I don't want this thing. You see that? I am moving the entire tree, you know, and one of the things that I don't want to ever do is to come by, prune a tree, then have somebody come by later that year and say, Dan, the whole tree fell over.
Yeah, so you want to limit the weight.
Pardon me?
Are those water sprouts?
No, that's just, well, it depends upon how you look at it. And again, if you over prune a pear, most of what you're going to get is water sprouts. And that's one of the problems with pruning pears at this time of year. A lot of my customers who have larger orchards, you know, I will come by, I will prune everything except for the pears and say, I'll be back in July. Trees have been fed well. They had all the leaves out there. It goes down in there. The sugars are remaining in the trunk and in the roots. And as soon as springtime gets here, I'm ready to go. Let me work. That's what they want to do. And then they turn into me later on the summer when it's July, when they're about to make their flowers. All the trees that we have here make the flowers in July and August. They're right there. They've been there since July and August. But if you're going to prune them again, it's July, it's 100 degrees. This pear, apple, peach, nectarine, whatever else you've got, knows that winter is coming and knows that summer is hard. And if you prune it in July, it doesn't react this way. So I come back in July with some of my major customers and I prune their stuff in July. I try not to prune in August because you've had half your flowers made. If you do it again in August, then it thinks, I've already made flowers. He's cutting my flowers off. What am I doing? And maybe it'll make more flowers and maybe it won't. Okay. One of the hard things about that is a pear right there. It's a really itty bitty teeny weeny little pear, but it's still a pear. And when I come by in August and I go like that,
Pear's gone.
And 10 ounces of pear hit the ground, that's hard for you to do and that's hard for anybody else to watch. But you're losing no more pears and you're gaining a better trained tree. So if you have normal European pears, not the Asian pears, I encourage you to try pruning them in July. They just respawn better. You can take up to up to about a third of the things off and not have the resprout like you do, because you're limited to about 15% of the leafing surface of the tree when you prune a pear, European pear, during dormant season.
So another way I think about
8% in July.
You can do about 30% in July.
Can you do it a little bit in spring and a little bit in?
You can do both times, yes.
My pears are too tall, so I'm trying to figure out how to.
Yeah, reduce the height in the summer and then thin it out in the spring. That way you can see, you know, when you're thinning it out, like he's thinning things out, he's also reducing the height right now. So the way I look at water sprouts too is in the spring you've got all of that energy in the roots.
Oh boy.
If you go top the tree, you're taking the growth points out, and so that it's got to come out somewhere else, all that energy.
It has to go out somewhere else.
And so it sends up water sprouts because it's like, you took my hormones, my growth hormones.
My arm is gone.
My arm is gone. I've got to grow all my tentacles
So it's going to make 5
back. Yeah. So I can be safe.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you want vigor, like with peaches, you take out as much as you can to spark all that growth. And we'll see how much growth the peaches got last year.
So we're going to have other people come in here and start pruning on this. Somebody step up. 2 people step up.
I want to learn, but I don't know what I'm doing.
You learn better through your hands and your head. Your flowers on most of this growth are up on top. So you don't want to take all these off or else she's going to have no pears this year.
These aren't water sprouts. These are...
Those are not water sprouts because they have a curve to them.
That's just new growth.
Those other things...
Straight up ones,
yeah,
right
there's
there.
a difference right there.
That's a water sprout. Go straight up. there are no flowers. Oh, looks like you got a flower bud on there, but maybe not. Looks like just a terminal bud.
Yeah.
When all of our fruit trees grow around here, you've got first year growth, and you can see this easily. Let's see if we can show this. Get among the people here. Okay, this nice fresh colored stuff right there, this is 22 growth. Okay, you look at that little knuckle there. Does that look like a knuckle? Little wrinkly knuckle right there. There's a knuckle right there. Okay, this is 21 growth. Okay, this is 20 growth.
See where the spurs are on
You've
that.
got the little knob right there. It looks
They're
like a
on
knuckle.
the 3rd year
See the
growth.
knuckles?
So they're,
I'm telling you this because when you cut the tree's last year's growth, if I was to take this thing here and cut it right there, that's last year's growth. The tree was just working on that. Okay, and he's got an attitude about his job. Hey, I was working there. What he's going to do is going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buds. He's going to make them grow like nuts because he was just working there. However, if it come down here and cut it there, it doesn't care as much. It'll make this one here grow, this one here, these 3 ones grow right there, and it won't put that much energy into it. But when you cut a fresh last year's growth on there, it'll go nuts on it because it was just working. It's got all that vascular tissue, all that growth hormone is all right there. Okay, and when you cut it off, you frustrate the tree and you make it want to pay you back or work harder to pay. Yeah, payback is really bad on pear trees.
So that's especially the way with apple trees. Don't leave stubs. Because I've noticed a lot of people leave stubs like this or even like this, and then if you look at the base the next year, there's like 6 new branches coming out from that base.
Because sometimes they don't have to wait for these. They don't have to use these buds that are on the outside. Sometimes if you cut that, you can actually come here and cut that bud out, cut that bud out, cut that bud out, cut all these buds out.
why?
You could do that, but it will still grow because as these things grow, as it has these buds that come out and you can see them, it lays down vestigial buds or latent buds
Ones that you can't
underneath the
see.
bark on the 1st and 2nd year growth. Okay, and if you cut it off right there, it'll activate all of those vestigial or latent buds in there. And then all of those things will go because it doesn't have any place else to let out its energy. Like on a water sprout, instead of having 1 water sprout, you'll have 7. You know? No, because water sprouts don't make fruit. Okay.
You can force them to make fruit by topping them. So you can use
And
water
you don't want to
sprouts.
wait till next November when the leaves are gone because it's not going to do that because it made the flowers in July and August. So when you see this thing coming up, if we happen to take off 16% of this thing and suddenly these things start shooting up, you're going to come over here and you're going to do this to each and every one of them. You're going to take those tips off when they're about that tall. And that's going to be sometime in May. Once the flowers are done, you start seeing growth out there, you're going to be out there, because you're out there once a week mowing the grass anyways, right? You'll want to pay attention to what part of the tree you're cutting. If you're going to cut this off, that's fine. If you don't want to cut that off and make it go nuts, do that. Okay? Or since I cut that one off too, do that. Now it's not going to water sprout as badly unless I hit that 16 to 20, 30%. You know, and then it's going to react poorly because it's Mr. Namby-Pamby tree. It's the problem child. It's the sensitive teenager.
So what's your goal when you're snipping off the tops in May? What's your goal?
In May? And May, if you've over pruned, you'll notice. Okay? So you're stopping it from doing that in order to, you want to let it get up and get a bud with some buds underneath it. And if you cut the top bud off, they'll come out here. Instead of putting all that energy into one focused leader, it'll put it in 5. And you'll have 1/5 of the growth on each of those. And those are easier to manage. Yes?
I guess I've been wondering about summer pruning as well.
Summer pruning is generally, if you're going to do that, July is better to do it than any other time because again, it makes the flower buds in July and August. And if you cut off the stuff that you don't want producing and you want to get stuff out of the way, it'll put more flower buds on for you next year.
I think I've heard in some of the little fruit tree methods and things,
Yes.
like they say to prune the new growth back in May to kind of help control
Yes.
the height as well as
Yes,
reduce the foliage the tree has so it's taking in less energy.
exactly. How many of you guys had your fruit trees long enough to see it do the summer leaf and fruit drop? Nobody? Okay, if you don't thin your fruit out, if you got a peach tree and you wow, look at all those blossoms, and then it comes along sometime, as soon as you hit 90 degrees, you'll see leaves in the middle of the tree turn yellow and fall off. And you might be contacting the extension, say, my peach tree's gonna die. No, it's just summer leaf drop, because it put on all of those leaves in April, May, and June when it was still nice and cool. Then suddenly it turns into August, July and August, and suddenly it can't support those leaves. And besides, they're way down very deep in the tree anyways. They're not producing the sugar for the tree because it doesn't have any light, because it's got all this other stuff up on top of it. And so you have to let it do that. If you want to prevent that, then you get out there and you summer prune. You open it up so you can get some light and air down in there, because sometimes it feels like it's a sweltering jungle just inside of a little peach tree. Yeah, sometimes when you're fertilizing it and watering it and giving it more than what it natively needs and is accustomed to, it's going to grow faster than it's normally natively accustomed to. We've worked hard on getting things like this domesticated over centuries. That's why you're going to have fun with that pluots you have over there, because it has not been around for centuries. And one thing I've noticed about pluots and apiums and all those other interspecific hybrids is they have really bad form. Yes. Really bad form. And you're going to spend a lot of time cutting those things, and maybe that'll make you enjoy the pluots better.
I'm more of a beginner. Maybe some other people like to
Yeah.
dumb it down a little bit for me.
Sure.
So objective is shape of the tree to make it accessible for picking, as well as
Right.
like optimal for air.
And getting light, yeah.
That will.
And you want to spark, so apples and pears form fruit on the second and third year wood. So you want to leave second and third year wood. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So, and you want to force some growth out of the bottoms of that, so you can take the tops off. So you know how people say don't ever top a tree? It doesn't apply to fruit trees. When you top them, that's how you force the lower growth. See, that's another thing. The horizontal branches that are poking out, they tend to form more of the fruit.
This one? Are you talking about this one?
Oh, I'm talking above her head. Yeah.
They're really short.
Because it is a pear.
Yeah. So see the lady with the earmuffs?
Yes.
And see that branch that's like arching over her head? Okay. Yeah, and it's got several pointing straight up. Yeah, the one, in the back. Yeah. So you see how there's spurs on that on the lower wood?
Yeah, I see the little spurs.
That's what we want to leave. And that's what we want to force. Everything that's pointing straight up is first year wood. And if we top those, if I don't have enough spurs, you could top those and force spurs out. So I, generally speaking, when I prune this tree, I thin it way out, and then I top just about everything.
Okay, so it's not that it produced every 3 years, it's that only wood that is 3 years old.
That's, okay, yes.
Getting the growth down, then it's growing out of that 3 at least plus
Yes.
wood, and then you're getting the spurs which produce flowers which produce fruit? Or?
Yes, exactly.
So why do you want it to grow out of
When
the
you're
old
pruning,
wood?
your first thing,
Because that's the only place that forms fruit. That's the only wood that will give you fruit. The new wood won't.
no purpose
So
whatsoever.
you're saying anything
except
that's
herd
older
feeders.
than 1 year.
So anything that's, so the 1 year old wood, you want to thin that out and choose the ones that are going to, in later years, give you fruit where you want it.
Why leave any of the 1 year woods on if they're not the only ones poking up?
Because you know how he said sometimes things, sometimes the wood ages out? You want to always have replacement wood coming in.
Would you want that one to be the sprigs that are going up?
I just top them, and then next year I'll look at them again, and if I don't like what they're doing, I'll remove those and let the new ones come in.
And the percentages he's throwing out there, that's how much you want to take overall?
Overall per year, if you take more than that, like 16% on a pear and 25% on an apple, like you said, it's going to react badly, and it's going to throw up all the water sprouts. Because the guy before took, 2 years ago, took out probably 30 to 40%, and that's why
why I have
it's
water
this full.
16 is really specific.
No, 16 is 1 degree, 1% over 15.
Yes.
15 is what I
So you
want
need
to
to
stay.
count your branches and
Count
do your
your
math. No,
branches.
just kidding.
And be conservative about it. Just don't take too much off. Because if you do take too much off, you're back in July.
You can be careful, and then you can take more off in the summer. It sounds like.
Yeah. If you're less careful, you'll just be back in July and do it.
So I always step back and I look at the tree and I say, am I getting, so I'll cut branches for a while and then I'll step back, like this far away and say, what is it looking like? What's crossing, for example, one that I would take off right here.
That's the one front because it's going straight up and doesn't have any flowers on it. See right here? Yep. See that right there? Right. So right here we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So can you see why I would take that one out? It was crossing and it was crowded. So I stand back and I look at it and say, what's crossing, what's crowded, what's going to give me a good fruit, what's going to add to the shape of the tree so it's attractive. And then I look at my pile.
Look at the pile, see what you got on the ground.
Yeah, because if you forget to look at your pile, it's bad.
Mr. Glover, so deadwood crossing, is there more? Or?
Deadwood crossing, and then you're pruning for space. Okay, and some things, like I said, require more space than others. This one over here, this is about as far as where we want to go, because you look at the ground, look at how much green wood you have on there, and that's also what you're trying to do here. You're trying to thin it out so you have fewer apples out there, so that you're trying to do it's another judgment call. How many apples do you think this branch here will support? Here's 1 apple. There's 2 apples. There's 3 apples and it's on the ground. However, the same way, 1 apple, 2 apple, 3 apples. You want it supporting the apples way back here so that you can support that weight. If you look through here, apple buds are pretty easy to spot. I think you got one of them there, 1 or 2 of them right there. But we don't want apples over here because it'll make the branch go like this. If it sits on there too long, it'll warp that branch like that, like this one here did. See this? This one right here was a branch like this, and it had 3 or 4 apples on it. Now it's down here rubbing the junipers.
Don't prune in the fall here because, number one, the reason I like to wait is, you don't have to wait, but the reason I like to wait is because, like right now, the sap is not flowing in these trees very much. It might be flowing a little bit, getting ready for spring. But once the sap starts flowing, your wounds are going to heal a lot faster. Does that make sense? So if you prune in the fall, if you prune too early in the fall, you might spark new growth, but more than likely you're just going to have that open wound sitting there all winter without any healing going to it.
So like later winter, basically.
Yeah.
So the sap is flowing and it can heal fast.
Yeah.
Do you have to wait like between storms or rain to?
Well, the other thing is, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't like to prune the fruit tree branches when they're frozen because there's more damage that can be caused, right?
When the fruit tree branches are frozen, they are not empty of water. All the sap does not go down into the lower trunk and in the roots. There is water in here. Obviously has to be. It's a living thing. Doesn't have water, doesn't live. I have worked at several nurseries, some of which hire people who are not that experienced. I always recall very vividly a sycamore tree in a 15-gallon pot that had a handprint on it right here at the 4-foot level, and the top died, of course. But there was a handprint. You can see the thumb wrapped around on top and 4 fingers wrapped around it. When you move the things, when you put a lot of pressure on them, when they're frozen solid, it's above freezing right now, so I'm not that concerned about it. I'm not going to climb anything because they're too tiny. When it's frozen, you don't want to manhandle it as much. And if you're pruning it like this, that's not going to damage anything. You can come here and grab a hold of this and cut here, okay? Don't grab it here and cut like here, because you can leave that handprint there. You may as well hang on to what you're cutting off. That doesn't hurt anything, because that's already gone.
Or just wait until, it's not.
Yes, you can wait until it's a nice day.
But is there like risk of disease if you do it when there's a storm coming, or?
As a general rule, I cancel all appointments when I have a storm coming, when things are wet or when they're snowbound. That's why I have to reschedule all the time in February and March. But that's when I start. And when it's time to prune, it's time to prune. But yeah, you don't want to be pruning things when they're wet, you know, because that gives all this stuff that's on the bark. It's sitting there waiting for a chance to get in. And if you come along with a nice sterilize this 10 minutes ago and do that, you just shoved it inside the tree, right onto that nice moist vascular tissue, and it'll get in there and stay until the sap starts flowing, and then it goes in. You know, there's only a few diseases you need to worry about like that. Cytospora is something you want to really want to be concerned about, because you lose the tree that way. You know, there is no fixing it. Fire blight, again, you can do that. I think that shot hole fungus can be spread, but doesn't spread that much and is not that dangerous. And every year you should be treating your trees to keep stuff off of them. You know, you could get powdery mildew on your apple trees as well. You don't want to inject that in either. So yeah, it's better to prune a dry tree. Don't prune them when they're wet.
Force growth.
There is no one spray that you can spray on everything for everything. Okay, you have fungicides that kill funguses. You have bactericides. The only one that I know of out there is streptomycin. You use that for to prevent fire blight. Most of the insects you have can be affected very well with a couple of the generic or general purpose insecticides. Those would probably be permethrin, 7, and bifenthrin. I think those are probably the 3 main ones. I swapped off of, I used to do spinosad for my peach tree borers, okay? But I noted a couple of years ago that was getting less effective on the peach tree borers. So I swapped that off and went back to 7. 7 is a chemical. It has nothing to do with Mother Nature, whereas spinosad does.
So here's the final product. It's kind of hard to see with all the snow, but it is opened up. It's a lot less crowded, and maybe you can tell how much shorter it is. It's definitely shorter. It's not crowded. We've pruned it to increase the fruit producing wood, and that's what it looks like. Dan and I usually have a pruning class at the end of every February every year. And I usually post those classes on Facebook in the Utah-based gardening pages. Hopefully this video has been helpful to you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like and subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.